do know I'm right. The podcast that uncovers the origin stories of some of the biggest names in sports, entertainment, and media. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese and Joe, our guest today. He's very busy around this time of year with the Major League Baseball season already underway.
Yeah, we are very happy that baseball is underway, and we are very happy that he was able to take some time and spend it with us today. So without further ado, he is a national baseball writer for the Wall Street Journal. He's the author of Swing Kings, the inside story of baseball's home run revolution. So we'll get to talk to him about that. He's also an adjunct professor for Manhattan College. So definitely get to pick his brain a little bit about that. But we're really happy that he's on with us today. Jared Diamond. Jared, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hey guys, I'm just glad to be talking about actual baseball after talking about nothing but labor and lockouts and that there was no baseball for 3 months. So this is a great improvement over that.
Absolutely. Certainly there. Now, Jared, I got to ask you first, growing up, how many times in your life did you hear the diamond in the rough thing being said to you?
All the time. I've heard every possible thing you could possibly hear about my name. People ask if I'm related to Neil Diamond. I am not. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. Diamond in the rough. Of course, it's not lost on me that my job is covering baseball, which is in fact played on a diamond. A friend of mine who you guys might know, Lindsay Adler, who covers the Yankees for The Athletic, loves to point out that there is actually a word called an aptronym that means that you have a name that is amusingly appropriate for your occupation. And I apparently have one of these. I did not know this was a word that existed. She did, and now I like to cite that all the time. That's
it. Really interesting. And when you proposed to your wife, I mean, nobody was better well equipped. Given a diamond. I mean, how's it get any better?
She was definitely happy to take the last name Diamond. People seem to like it. It's a good name. It sounds good. It makes you sound very sophisticated and regal, I think.
It sounds royal.
It's very, very dynamic. And I don't know if you follow wrestling at all, but they do have a faction called Diamond Mine. So perhaps they should contact you to be the leader of that little posse there they have going.
As long as I don't need to actually get into the ring and be thrown against the mat or be punched in the face or kicked or anything, I'd be fine with that.
There you go. Fantastic. So you've been working it now for over a decade, which is pretty crazy. Time just flying by. But what for you growing up or maybe in high school made you want to pursue a career in sports journalism?
Yeah, this was my dream job. The job I have right now is the dream job I've had for as long as I can remember. And I grew up in the New York area, loving baseball more than just about anything on earth. And it was pretty evident, and I'm sure a lot of people have a similar story, but it was pretty evident early on that I was not going to play center field for the Yankees anytime soon or ever. Don't quite have the speed, strength, coordination, or athleticism required for that job. So I wanted to find a way to be around the game that I loved. And I did not necessarily realize when I was a little kid that you could be paid to write about baseball. That blew my mind when I learned that fact, that the people who write in the newspaper or the people that talk about baseball on television are actually paid to do so. It's their jobs. And that was it for me. I was committed to pursuing a career in sports media in some capacity, working in and around baseball. I started working for the local paper in my town when I was 15 years old. So I've actually been sort of a paid journalist since I was 15, nonstop. And I was really lucky to have the opportunity to go to Syracuse University, to the journalism school there. When I arrived, I did not know if I wanted to go into broadcasting or if I wanted to be a writer. I didn't really know even know the difference or know the difference in what those career paths would look like. So I initially pursued both my freshman year at Syracuse. And I would say that writing sort of chose me as much as I chose it. Opportunities to advance in the newspaper presented themselves to me very early on. People believed that I had talent, and I sort of kept going on that path. Had a bunch of internships, got to the Wall Street Journal when I was 22 years old. I started there in 2011. I've been at the Journal now for over 11 years, and I've been really fortunate to have been covering baseball, which is what I wanted to do, pretty much exclusively since 2013. This is actually, this is going to be my 10th season covering baseball, which incredible how quickly it went by.
The list of Syracuse alumni is long, it's illustrious. Nick and I have been fortunate that a bunch of the people who work in the industry now who went to Q's, we've had on our program, right? So could go on right down the list: Lee McHugh, Len Berman. But for you personally, great communication school, great broadcast journalism school. What did you do on campus in terms of internships and staying active on campus? And what was the process like that led into you getting your first job with the Wall Street Journal? Because again, coming out of college, that is very, very difficult to do, especially today.
Yeah, it's amazing how many amazing people have come out of Syracuse. Forget all the broadcasters, just the baseball writers that are currently working that came from Syracuse. Jeff Passan, of course, went to Syracuse. Some guys that I went to school with, specifically Matt Gelb, Andy McCullough. There's a whole bunch of just great baseball writers that I overlapped with, which is really, really remarkable. I went to the Daily Orange office. The Daily Orange is the Syracuse student paper. I showed up there on the very first day I arrived on campus.
Wow.
I went to talk to the sports editor. I said, I want to cover sports. I will do anything that you want. I just want to have an opportunity. And the editor, it was a guy named Ethan Ramsey. At that time, he no longer works in the business, but was a great editor. Said, okay, well, what do you know about cross country? I said, a lot, which was a blatant lie. The real answer was nothing. But that was really all it took. He said, great, you're now the cross country beat writer. Go have fun. So that's really how it started. And over the course of my time at the DO, I got to cover not just cross country. I covered women's basketball. I covered men's basketball for a season. I covered football for 2 seasons. In the 2008 and 2009 seasons, I covered football. I covered men's basketball in the 08-09 Syracuse season. It was the year that Syracuse played the 6 overtime Big East tournament game against UConn that I had the opportunity to be at, which still to this day might be the most amazing thing I've covered, in spite of all the amazing baseball games I've covered. I think that 6 overtime basketball game that Syracuse played against UConn still ranks as number 1. It was such a memorable experience for me. In addition to all the things I was doing on campus, I also was the sports editor of the Daily Orange in the fall of 2009. In addition to all that, I had a bunch of internships in the summer. The 2 big ones that the one that really stands out, or the one that really led to me getting my job at the Journal, is the internship I had after my junior year. Also in 2009, I interned at MLB.com, which at the time had an incredible internship program that no longer exists, at least in that form today. But the way it worked back then was that there were 30 MLB.com interns. One was assigned to each team, and you just served as the second beat writer on that team, working directly with the actual beat writer. You didn't go on the road, but you covered all of the home games, every single one. You were in the clubhouse, you were in the press box. It was my first time being in a Major League Baseball press box, a Major League Baseball clubhouse. It was a dream. The 2009 Yankees were obviously a great team. They won the World Series. A lot of the players that I grew up watching were on that team: Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Jorge Posada. Really remarkable experience for me. And on that internship, there was another guy who was in the clubhouse most days, an older guy. His name was Bill Eichenberger. He at the time worked worked for the Sporting News, and for whatever reasons that I don't understand to this day, he took a liking to me. I think he sort of took pity on me, really, recognized that I had no idea what I was doing, that I was a bit starstruck, that I was nervous. I was very uncomfortable. And he talked to me a lot and talked to me about my career and my aspirations. And mostly was just reassuring, letting me know that I was going to be okay. Didn't think much of it, honestly. We stayed in touch a little bit after that, but not all that much. I bumped into him again a few other times when I would be in New York covering some Syracuse basketball in New York, Big East tournament, the NBA draft. I covered the NBA draft that year when Johnny Flynn was drafted by Minnesota 6th overall. Anyway, didn't really think much of this guy, but then fast forward a year later, I had now graduated college. I'm interning at the Virginian Pilot, a newspaper in Norfolk, Virginia, covering the AAA affiliate of the Orioles, the Norfolk Tide, which was a really fascinating team, actually. That team had Jake Arrieta was on that team. Zach Britton was on that team. It was sort of a very interesting group. I read an article in the New York Post that said that the Wall Street Journal was starting this sort of new sports thing that didn't exist before. And oh, by the way, Bill Eichenberger was going to be the editor of the New York sports coverage. And I said, well, that's interesting. I know that guy. I wonder if he remembers me. I literally sent him a cold email saying, I don't know if you remember me, but I was that kid in the Yankee clubhouse last year who looked terrified all the time, where you were very nice to. And he said, I do remember you. Of course I remember you. And oh, by the way, we have a job opening right now for someone like you that we're having trouble filling. Why don't you come in and meet my boss? And, a week or two later, I was in the office meeting the sports editor of the whole place, this guy, Sam Walker. I am of the belief that I went into that interview where Sam had the mandate of, you have to hire the very next person who walks into this room, no matter what, because you've interviewed 100 people and you haven't hired any of them. And I just so happened to be the next person to walk into the room. So I was hired as a news assistant at the Journal. A couple of weeks later, I was 22 years old. It was an incredibly fortuitous situation. But I think really the lesson from it is you never know who's going to be the person who gives you the break that can make your career. So treat everybody like he or she could be that person. Follow up with people, stay in touch with people, because one day that guy who you met in the clubhouse at Yankee Stadium might end up just being the person who gives you your dream job.
Excellent advice. Right place, right time, right people. Need to be nice to everybody. I always tell people as well that ask me for advice, not that I'm in a great spot to give it, but always, my interns at work, I always tell them, make sure you're talking to everybody. You never know in a few years from now who's going to be hiring. So crucial story there. And for you, how great did it feel, just a few months out of graduation, you're coming home and you're coming to work in the biggest market there is?
Yeah, it was crazy. I was not covering baseball when I started. That's important to remember. I was, like I said, I was a news assistant, which is a full-time job, but I would describe it basically as a glorified intern. You're basically doing the work that no one else wanted to do. You're not paid very much. It's really a learning experience. And I did that for about a year and a half, maybe even about 2 years, which on the one hand, it was terrible because it was, being a news assistant is not fun. It's tough. It was a tough job. And again, I was overwhelmed. I wasn't sure I belonged. I was the youngest person, that I knew in the newsroom in any area, let alone in sports. But I sort of just kept plugging at it, kept my head down, tried not to sort of be noticed for the good things, not for bad things. And fortunately, heading into the 2013 season, there was an opening to write about baseball. I got to do a little bit of baseball in 2012, sort of as a backup. And then 2013, the opportunity arose where I was able to cover baseball sort of on a full-time way. I was very fortunate to get that opportunity, and it sort of went from there. And once I started covering baseball, I really felt like I was starting to fit in, because again, when you're a news assistant, it is tough, and there isn't really there wasn't really a support system. I had to kind of find my own way, try to make my own opportunities. And fortunately, it happened when it did.
How terrifying was it for you going to your first spring training? And how did you manage to integrate yourself and make all the connections you did?
It was hard. I actually first went to spring training in 2012, just for a short time. I did like a week with the Mets, a week with the Yankees, so the beat writers could get some time off. And I had no idea what I was doing, right? The baseball writing world, and I don't say this as a criticism. I think this is just a natural reality of anything. The baseball writing world is very insular, right? Everybody knows each other. Everyone sees each other at the same things every single year. You see everyone at the World Series and the All-Star game, the winter meetings. And when you're on a beat, forget it. It's even more so, because you're with these people for 10 to 12 hours a day, every single day from mid-February to the end of September, or maybe October if you're covering a playoff team, right? So of course it's very insular. Of course it's very cliquey. And I don't use the word cliquey in sort of a negative, sort of derogatory way. It's just, they know each other well, and people are not necessarily going to care about the new guy, especially the backup new guy who's coming in, let alone, the new beat writer in 2013. So it was tough. It was hard to meet people. It was hard to sort of make friends, sort of like being the new kid at school to an extent. The thing that really did it to me, and I really owe this person an incredible debt of gratitude, is actually LaTroy Hawkins. If you guys remember LaTroy Hawkins, the longtime pitcher in Major League Baseball. The Mets signed him in 2013. It was my first year covering baseball as full-time Mets beat writer. LaTroy Hawkins had signed with the Mets as a free agent. He was heading into his age 40 season. I think he was actually already 40 years old at that point. The ultimate veteran and the nicest guy in the world. And you could talk to anyone in baseball, and I promise you they will have a LaTroy Hawkins story, but I'm just going to tell you mine. I'm in the clubhouse this first week or so, and again, I had no idea what I was doing. One day, LaTroy Hawkins calls me over to his locker. I'm completely terrified because I had no idea what was about to happen. Why is this 40-year-old veteran calling me over to his locker? He goes, "Hey, are you new?" And I said, "Well, is it really that obvious?" He goes, "Yeah, clearly it is." He goes, "Don't worry, you're going to be fine. I'm going to make sure you are fine." And he basically took me around the clubhouse over the next couple of days, introduced me to the other players. He said, if you need anything, you just come to me. I will make sure that you sort of fit in here, that you get what you need. And this blew my mind. First of all, he was new to the clubhouse. He had only been with the Mets for a couple of weeks. Second of all, this is a 20-year Major League veteran who, for no reason, literally no reason, decided to take an interest in me and help me out, just truly out of the goodness of his heart. I had no other reason to do so. It was, I wasn't gonna curry any favor in terms of coverage. It was LaTroy Hawkins. It wasn't a star player, and I really I cannot thank him more for that. He and I have stayed close ever since then, and I don't know what would have happened to me if he hadn't done that.
True pros pro. That's a really awesome story. For you, your social media following from an outsider looking in really exploded in 2015 when you were covering one of the most wild teams, I think, of all time. Such an unlikely story, the 2015 Mets. What are some of your memories from that year? And what for you, because you were at all of them, what are some of the Terry Collins pressers that really stick out to you?
God, man. The 2015 Mets, where it was covering that team, was just a remarkable experience. There's so much about that season that just defies belief. I mean, the team was terrible for like most of the season, only to end up going to the World Series. Wilmer Flores cries on the field, and then the Mets then traded for Yoenis Cespedes a couple of days later, and he had the most unbelievable 2-month stretch you could possibly have. I think a lot about what Matt Harvey did that year, basically pitching against Scott Boras's advice in the postseason, going past that innings limit, pitching all the way into the World Series. David Wright, that really stands out to me about the 2015 team as well. What he did to return from the back injury he had, the injury that ended his career, coming back and playing through so much pain to take part in the World Series in 2015. So much about that. Daniel Murphy's home run barrage in the postseason. It was a charm team. It was a really remarkable team. I had a blast covering it. It's one of those World Series teams that, like, if you were there, you'll always remember it, because it was so unexpected, and so many weird and surprising things happen as that season went on. Covering Terry Collins also was a trip. I'll probably never cover someone like him again. He's just this old school guy. There really aren't any managers really like him anymore. Maybe Dusty Baker with Houston is to an extent, but it was a lot of fun because he was sort of this old school guy who viewed the job in an old school way. But yeah, the 2015 Mets were amazing, and I'm really thankful I got to cover them.
Yeah, at least once a week, I turn on SNY, and there you are, 5 days in Flushing, talking about that crazy little trade deadline thing there. I mean, it's remarkable how often they show you that. And you've done some other TV work as well. For you, was there any hesitation doing any stuff like that, or were you pretty confident that your stuff would translate?
I love doing TV. I would love to do more TV. There's some, I certainly do not consider myself a TV pro at this point. I think I've done a pretty good job with the opportunities I've had, the places I have been able to appear at. Fortunately, I've been able to do a good amount of TV. There's some considerations. I cover baseball full time for the Wall Street Journal. The most typical path to doing TV for a baseball person, of course, is MLB Network. That's not a place that I'm really in the position to work at, right? It's a conflict, essentially. The Wall Street Journal wouldn't even allow me to work at MLB Network because I cover Major League Baseball. I have to do so objectively. Working at a place that is owned by the people I cover would be a violation of some of those ethical concerns that the Journal has. So, we'll see what the future has in store. I would love to do more TV at some point. We'll see. We'll see where that goes.
All right. Tough question here, but be honest. I know this guy has been confused for you in the past. Has anybody ever called you Anthony DeComo?
And Tony and I, let me say, I should say that Tony is one of my best friends in all of baseball. He I don't know if he would say the same about me, but I'll say that about him. Actually, I love telling this story. He absolutely hates it, so I'm going to tell it. We were covering a series in Anaheim. The Mets were in Anaheim. I forget what year. Maybe it was maybe 15, 14. Doesn't matter. We're covering a series in Anaheim, and the people there who were at the security checking our bags, and when we walked in, was convinced we were brothers, which again, big compliment to me, probably a bit of an insult to him. So, and he hates when I tell that story. I think it's embarrassing for him, but I love it because I am very happy to be confused for Tony's brother.
That's hysterical. I love that story. So when you're on the beat and you're going to the stadium every day, obviously it becomes a grind, but what is your typical daily routine as to when you're getting there, when you're leaving, what are you doing during BP, and more importantly, we want to know, what are you eating there? Do you have a specific pregame meal? Are you snacking throughout? How do you get through those long nights, especially when there's some big time extra inning games?
Yeah, my job is obviously very different now than what it was then. I'm not at the ballpark even 1/100th as often as much as I was then. I have a much different job now. But when I was on the beat, look, you're getting to the ballpark for a 7:00 game around 2 p.m., 2:30 p.m. The clubhouse would typically open a little after 3. Then you'd go in there. Then you'd go on to the field for batting practice. There'd be a manager press conference, and then you're then you're there for the game, and then you're there after the game as you're working on your story. So they were long days, right? You're doing it day in, day out, city after city, all over the country. It's a lot of fun, right? It's a grind, but it's also really fun. You really feel like you're part of something. You're there every day. Every game is sort of like a chapter in a book, right? And you're the one that's sort of writing it in real time, documenting it in real time, which I really, really enjoyed. It was a great experience. As for what I'm eating, covering the Mets is particularly good on that front because I've obviously been to every stadium in the majors many times. There's no Citi Field might have the best food in Major League Baseball. If it's not number one, it's in the top three. There's sort of this unending array of options to eat at the concessions in Citi Field. There's always press box food. Every stadium does have press box food. The quality varies. Of course, the concession quality varies ballpark to ballpark. But there's certain places where you just always have to go to the concessions. Like Citi Field is one. San Francisco, Seattle, San Diego, some of the really good ones that jump to mind.
Were you on the beat? I remember there was like a crazy story that the Mets, they went to Citizens Bank Ballpark. They set a record for most Philly cheesesteaks eaten in a 3-game series. Were you around for that crazy story?
I was. Oh goodness. I forget when that. I kind of don't remember. That was 2014.
I think so. Yeah.
I was there. I don't think I wrote about it though. Maybe I did. I don't know. I was
Crazy
there
story.
though. I think my friend, one of my good friends, broke that story. Mike Vorkunov.
Yes.
Right. He was working at
so.
the Star Ledger at the time. He now works for the Athletic, and he's a really good friend. He and I do a newsletter together. I'm called The 30. I'm pretty sure that was this. He broke that story. It was in 2014.
Crazy.
Yeah. Do you know anybody else at the Star Ledger, the Newsday, any of the other local papers? You know everybody, huh?
If they work in baseball, I know all of them.
Unbelievable.
I've been covering baseball long enough now that I've gotten a chance to meet a lot of really great people. And I really do love a lot of the people that I compete with. The baseball writing world is mostly really, really good people. And I look forward, I don't see these people as much as I used to, especially because of the pandemic, but it's great to catch up at the World Series, at the winter meetings, at the All-Star game, at some of these big events.
Jared, what was the reaction like in the press box when Bartolo went deep?
I hate to admit this, but I wasn't there.
Oh,
I was not there.
Vacation.
I don't remember why. It was what year was that? 2015?
16, I think.
For whatever reason, I just wasn't on that road trip. By 2016, I was already starting to transition off the beat sort of into the job I have now. So I wasn't going on the road with the Mets as much that year. So I wasn't there. My colleague Andrew was there. So you'll have to get Andrew Beaton on the podcast. He can tell you all about it.
There seems to be a lot of friendly competition there among people that you know. I'm personally a Yankees fan. Nick's the Mets fan here. So the dynamic between us is great. So I wanted to ask you about the transitioning of the beats. What was it like to do the Yankees, and what are like the primary differences between covering both New York teams?
I only did the Yankees for a short time. It actually wasn't even a full season because again, I was transitioning to the national job then, but it's very different. The environment's very, very different. It's at the time, the Mets might be different now, right? Because new ownership. But at the time, the Yankees were a much, much more sort of buttoned up, more corporate environment. Everything felt a little more formal, a little more, everything was just sort of more official, right? You weren't able to sort of roam around as much. You felt like you were being watched more. Things were more observed. Things were probably a little more professional, let's be honest. So it was sort of good and bad. And from a media standpoint, it was different too, because for whatever reason, and I don't really know why, the Yankee beat, the members on really haven't changed all that much. There's a lot of sort of long-standing Yankee beat writers. It's finally starting to change now a little bit more. But when I was there as an intern in 2009, all the way to 2016, when I was sort of on the beat, it was a lot of the same people still covering the teams. They sort of had their own thing. Whereas the Mets beat tended to be a little bit younger, people cycle through it more. So it was a different experience. I wish I had gotten a chance to cover the Yankees full time a little bit longer, because it's obviously like a fascinating beat. The Yankees are always interesting, but I love what I'm doing now. So maybe I don't actually wish that.
No, I was just curious. And so we'll talk about the differences in beats. I also want to talk about the differences between doing what you do, covering a team, whether it's the Mets or covering a sport nationally, and writing a book. So at the beginning, I mentioned that you have written a book in the past, right? So Swing Kings, talk about the process before you wrote the book. Is that something that you always wanted to do, even when you were younger? Because when you're young and you want to be a writer, your first thought is, okay, there's newspaper out there, but there's also book writing, right? So again, Swing Kings, it's about all the home run history and stuff like that. When did you know you wanted to write the book? What are the primary differences between writing for a medium like newspaper or digitally now, because that is a thing? So what are the primary differences between both? And do you have any other books in here?
I always viewed book writing as sort of a bucket list item. I always knew I wanted to do it. Never really felt like, I never knew when it would happen, in part because I just didn't, it was so daunting, right? The idea of it was so daunting. And I'm like, could I really do this? Am I capable? I kind of realized, again, as when the idea of the book got pitched to me by the person who is now my agent, the realization I had, with a little prodding from her, was you're never going to feel ready, right? There's never going to be this grand epiphany where you're going to look in the mirror and say, yep, I am capable of writing a book. You're always going to feel inferior. You're always going to feel incapable. It's always going to seem daunting. And the only way you're ever going to do is if you just throw yourself into it and do it. So that's what I did. I decided to pursue Swing Kings. It was a topic I was interested in. On the one hand, it isn't that different because it's still reporting, right? It's talking to people and writing about it and constructing a narrative. On the other hand, it's much longer, of course, right? An article is 1,000 words, maybe a book is 90,000 words. When I first started working on the book, I was chatting in the Dodger clubhouse in Arizona with Justin Turner, a guy I've known a long time. And he asked me, so how long is the book compared to your articles? I said, well, an article is 1,000, the book is 90,000 about. So he said, well, that doesn't sound that big of a deal, just like writing 90 articles. And I said, yeah, that's like me telling you, you have to get all 200 hits you're going to get this season in a week. I don't know. I think he understood at that point. There's other differences, right? Like in a newspaper article, you're sort of putting all the good stuff right at the beginning, because the idea is that people might not get all the way to the bottom, trying to hook people in. In a book, it's more like a narrative. You're trying to tell a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and you might want to create sort of drama and tension and not sort of put the end at the beginning, so to speak. So I had to learn sort of the differences in how you write it, but it was a great experience. I would love to do another one. I definitely plan to do another one. I don't have another one sort of in mind right now. I'm a little busy at the moment. I have 2 kids that are young. It's a lot going on, but I feel like I have to do another book because my first one came out on March 30th of 2020, which turned out to not be the most fun time to put out a life goal project, as the world was completely shutting down because of COVID for the first time. So I feel like I have to do another one for that reason alone.
LaTroy Hawkins. Biography.
Yeah, maybe I'll write a book with LaTroy. It's not a bad idea.
Not at all. Stories
No,
from
not at
LaTroy.
all. It has to come from the pitching perspective, though. You need one book for each.
Right. I need to do, it's like the sister project. Exactly.
Right. Absolutely. So at the top, I mentioned that you are also an adjunct professor for Manhattan College. So How did that opportunity come about for you? Is something like giving back to the academic side another thing, kind of like the book writing, where when you're younger, you think about where you're going to be 10 to 15 years from now, if you were going to be in the position like that to be able to give back. And when you do teach, what are the primary principles and stuff that you do teach?
I knew I wanted to teach. I love working with young journalists. I care a lot about the future of the business. It's something I'm very passionate about. And basically, it's very simple. I decided I wanted to do it. So I just started putting myself out there and writing, literally just sending cold emails to the deans of chairs of communication programs from colleges around the area, not knowing what would happen, if people would respond. Turns out a lot of people responded, and there was actually a good amount of interest in me coming to teach. And Manhattan just sort of ended up being the one that responded most aggressively first. And I've been teaching a sports writing class there. I absolutely love it. It is so much fun. I'm not doing it this semester, but I am doing it again in the fall. So I'll be back at it in August. I love it. It's just such a great experience to work with young people, people that care, that want to sort of do what I do. It's an absolute blast. I didn't really know what I was doing when I started, right? The thing about higher education is like no one really tells you much. You kind of just figure it out as you go along. Like you're considered an expert, so you have to just be an expert. But I've learned as time has gone on about how to teach and what makes for a good class, and it's been a lot of fun. I really love it, and I really look forward to the fall to do it again.
You certainly are all about the next generation. The 30 newsletter is fantastic. How did that project come about for you originally?
It actually started with Mike Vorkunov, I mentioned before, The Athletic. He I think was unemployed for a little bit between jobs or just looking for something else to do. I don't exactly remember. Maybe he was doing some freelance work. And he had this idea of doing sort of a Q&A series with journalists that he liked about his career, about their careers. And I was the first person he asked to do sort of a Q&A, and I answered the questions, things like that. He did a couple more, and I started helping him with some of the Q&As. We're good friends. And at some point we kind of got the idea of like, hey, these are kind of doing well. People seem to like this. Maybe we could like send these out as an email newsletter. So that's what we started doing, and then got a little traction. And then we started doing posting job openings as well. And that is when it really took off. We've been doing it ever since. We've been doing it, I think, since like 2016 or 17. I'd say the frequency with which we send out newsletters has ebbed and flowed as the years have gone on. We both have 2 small children, which we didn't when we started, but I always viewed the 30 as sort of scratching the itch that I had to work with young people to sort of help the next generation, like you mentioned. Teaching has sort of also now sort of filled that spot in my heart. It's been great. I love the 30. We're trying really hard to get back to doing it more frequently, actually weekly. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Weekly, that'd be quite crazy. A lot of work there to do a weekly newsletter, I can imagine.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's why the frequency has waned. Again, having kids really does change things. You're a little bit busier. Mike has a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I have 1-year-old twins. So we're a little busy these days.
For sure, no doubt about that. For you in your career, what is your I'm right moment? So what I mean by that is a time where you wanted to do something, you ask somebody for advice, they say, Jared, I don't think you should do that. And you said, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway. And ultimately, you will see why it is that I'm right.
Huh. That's difficult because the answer to that question, I feel like may still reveal itself moving forward. I'm not sure it's like happened yet, although there are a few things I could think of. I think when I was starting in journalism back when I was in college, that was a time when the media business was really struggling, right? Newspapers were at their lowest point. then things were really bad for the media industry, and there was a lot of questions about what the future of media was going to be. So everyone tells you like you're an idiot for pursuing this path because it's a dying industry, right? That was what a lot of people said. Everyone did at that time. People may still say it now, but it was even worse then. And I maybe stupidly said, maybe that's true, but I think I'm good enough. I think I'm good enough to transcend the problems in the industry. And I've been fortunate enough that so far my career has gone pretty well. So that's the one that jumps to mind.
Jared, thank you for doing this with us. We really appreciate it. This is going to be the last question from me here before we let you go. And I apologize that we waited almost 45 minutes to get to the fun stuff, but we do get to the fun stuff here at the end. So I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, what are going to be some of the more interesting storylines that we should watch out for in Major League Baseball this season?
Ooh, interesting. It's going to be a fun season. I'm really excited about it. I'm very fascinated, as I'm sure many people are, about whether Shohei Ohtani is able to even come close to repeating the incredible historic season he had last year, and whether with a healthy Mike Trout and hopefully a healthy Anthony Rendon, the Angels could finally do the impossible and actually get to the postseason so we could see these guys play on the biggest stage. I'm really interested in that. I'm very excited in seeing what the Blue Jays do after the offseason they had. The whole AL East is fascinating with Tampa Bay, Toronto, New York, and Boston. That's going to be a lot of fun. There's a few sort of under the radar teams I'm excited about. Seattle comes to mind. They sort of unexpectedly won 90 games last year. Are they going to sort of transcend, like finally make the playoffs, snap that streak? I think that's going to be interesting. I also think Minnesota has a chance to be interesting. There's a lot of really good stories out there. And I just can't wait to see how they unfold over the next, 5+ months.
That sounds really, really great. And nothing from the National League side, huh? Everything came from the American League.
That's true. That wasn't on purpose. I swear that wasn't on purpose. There is a National League team that interests me that no one's really talking about. And I'm not really sure that I actually in my heart believe this team is good enough to make the playoffs or actually be good, but like I'm interested in them. And that's Miami. I'm kind of interested in Miami. I really love their starting pitching, especially if Sixto Sanchez could come back. They're young. Their starting rotation might be the best in a very competitive NL East. There's a lot of names people don't know. I'm not sure they have enough offense to sustain it, but I'm interested in the Marlins. That's an NL team that comes to mind.
What a story that would be. Marlins go to the playoffs after Derek Jeter leaves. Tremendous.
Maybe that's why they'll go to the playoffs. You ever think about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you're in the New York area, of course, so some big events going on this summer at both ballparks. There's going to be a Derek Jeter Day in the Bronx. Got Keith Hernandez jersey retirement and Mets Old Timers Day. I know you said you don't go to the ballpark as much anymore, but is there certain big events you make sure you're getting there for?
Look, I'll probably be at the All-Star game in July, of course. I've been to every All-Star game since 2013. I don't know. It sort of depends, right? Like things sort of pop up. It's hard to predict. Like there's the things you can predict, the All-Star game, the World Series. And there's always other things that sprout up as the year goes on. So we'll just kind of have to see.
All right. So we'll keep a lookout, Joe, for Jared's tweets from the All-Star game. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, hopefully he's at the ballpark just a little bit more this year. You don't have to go there for every game, but just here and there. Would like to see you out there taking some pictures and kind of getting back into a little bit of a normal routine. I know last year we came back and everything started feeling like normal, but I think now this is the first season, especially with the new CBA, where we can really, really feel like we're back to normalcy.
Let's hope. That is the hope.
And Nick and I hope for the best for you, wish for the best of you and your family moving forward. And like I said, we give our guests here the last words. So anything else you would like to share? Anything else you would like to promote, Jared? Go ahead. The floor is all yours. One more time. Thanks again for doing this.
Thanks so much. Yeah, like you can follow me on Twitter at Jared Diamond. All my stuff I tweet there, obviously at the Wall Street Journal. it's going to be a fun season. So this is a lot of fun. I really appreciate you guys having me.
All right, Jared, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. That's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our special guest, Jared Diamond, my co-host, Joe Calabrese. I'm Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.